I learn a lot more from my failures than when something works. You just have to keep going. I'm just this girl that is randomly wondering how things work and how things interact because I couldn't really talk to anyone about it. And then when I started in undergrad, I did start meeting some people that were asking the same questions and were very curious. It really reassured me that I'm in the right path and I'm not just this weird kid that is always asking these questions and trying to do more and trying to figure out what I can do with my life. I would really love to help build up more resources for people that want to become entrepreneurs or people that do want to transition to different careers and pathways. And we're still trying to figure out how to do within my university, but I think can be very impactful in such a large organization. I think we can try to take down some of those barriers and explain it and expose them to different things.
Welcome to the Science with Impact podcast, where we discuss topics related to broadening our societal impacts through STEM research. I have an incredible guest here for you. Dr. Pazos, would you please introduce yourself?
My name is Stephanie Pazos. I'm an assistant professor of teaching of chemistry and biochemistry at the University of California, Santa Barbara. I'm actually also the co-owner and chief scientist at Technology, which is a photonics company that I started.
Oh, wow. That's so cool, serving two roles. And I know you're a parent and you're just doing so much. Congratulations on the evolution of your career. Why should our listeners, who are primarily research scientists and organizations looking to broaden their societal impacts, listen to our conversation today?
I think we've had some great discussions on and a lot of the barriers that students, researchers really do face, what these barriers are and what we can all do as individuals or organizations to try to break down some of those barriers that are still there.
How did you come to know me and Science with Impact?
I met you 2 months ago at the SACNAS leadership, the Linton Boudry Leadership Institute at the Howard Hughes Medical Institute in Maryland. And we spent gorgeous 5 days talking with a lot of really successful, like-minded individuals about how to become stronger leaders. And it was really great chatting with you and meeting everyone at the Institute. It was really impressive hearing about what your company is doing and how it's also helping other students. And it's just beautiful how you can use your background in graphic design and make beautifulness in chemistry. So I thought that was very clever. And I thought it was just very unique. And it speaks to your personality.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. What are some of the impactful moments that led to you becoming a scientist?
Didn't really know what a scientist was growing up. Like I was always very curious little girl that would always ask what this was, what that was, anything. I knew I really liked chemistry since high school. I was really excited with the math, but I think I didn't really fully understand what a scientist was and got me really excited about being a scientist until I took organic chemistry. When you take organic chemistry, you start learning reaction mechanisms and you learn to predict the products. So you're kind of thinking, well, this is what I need to make. How do I make this? It was learning that specifically that I realized, oh, there are so many possibilities. There are so many different ways to make something that really impacted me as a scientist. It really even further become more curious at how science works and trying to understand some of the fundamentals, because that's also something that I think really impacted me as a student, being, okay, these fundamentals are really important because it's not just about memorizing everything. It's trying to understand big picture and how things really do work in science. And I think that just really grew my curiosity. I remember that day in lecture practicing a predict the product. And I was just, wow, I didn't even know who to go talk to afterwards. And I finally was brave enough to go talk to the professor. And I think she appreciated me sharing how that one moment really triggered my understanding of what was going on, because I was really intimidated with organic chemistry, as most people are. I think it was just beautiful to see that.
I'm really surprised you say that it was organic chemistry that solidified the deal for you to be a scientist.
I was terrified of taking that class as well because of everything you hear about organic chemistry. And so now when I teach organic chemistry, I actually tell my students this story and how I was scared and it's okay. We're coming in with a clean slate. We are not going to listen to anything that we've heard about organic chemistry. Make your own opinion. Try to explain to them what the class is going to look like and how it's different because they haven't really learned organic chemistry in high school, and it's also very different than general chemistry. I've had quite a few students come to me and tell me that they appreciated it. Some of them do end up liking organic chemistry, but then again, the majority are still like, I just have to take this class. But thank you for trying to get me to think of it in a positive light.
At the time that you took organic chemistry, had you already decided on science as a major?
I came in as a chemistry major only with the understanding that I liked science and I was really interested in chemistry. I just didn't know what you can do. I didn't really know what it was to be a scientist. So that's pretty much how I started. And I don't know, maybe work in a lab, but I don't really know what being in a lab is like. And so that's why I don't know if I'm even going in the right career path, because of course, mostly everyone I knew in undergrad to be a dentist, they wanted to be a doctor, they wanted to be a pharmacist. I don't want to do any of that, but asking questions and I'm looking, investigating different things. It was a little confusing at times.
Can you walk me through some of your pre-college experiences that inspired you to ask more questions and to start doing things the way a scientist would that ultimately resulted in you choosing science as your major?
I'm a first generation Latina in the family. So first one to go to college. And most of the people we knew in our social circles, my parents' friends, I didn't know anyone that ever went to college, really liked science. I always felt I was bugging people when I was asking questions. And so I felt growing up, I'm just this annoying girl that is randomly wondering how things work and how things interact if I couldn't really talk to anyone about it. And then when I started an undergrad, I did start meeting some people that were asking the same questions and were very curious. It really reassured me that I'm in the right path and I'm not just this weird kid that is always asking these questions and trying to do more and trying to figure out what I can do with my life. Because also as a Latina, you are kind of expected to, sure, maybe graduate high school, but then you are expected to get married and raise a household, and asking questions you're kind of not really thought of as the person anyone's going to go to for any help. They'll go to your husband, for example. So I think that was always really odd and something that didn't really resonate with my family or anyone in my social circle at that time.
I had very similar experiences, if that makes you feel at all validated. I was always worried that I was making too much noise and taking up too much space with my questions and what I wanted to talk about. And I didn't shallow talk. I never liked it. I really asking deep questions, and that's just the way it is. Responses was never good enough for me. And there's the but why people, and then there is what it is people, and it's sometimes those two can conflict. And when it intersects with your identity as a Latina, I totally resonate with that.
I appreciate you telling me that you resonate with that, and hopefully some cultural changes start happening now that more of us are getting educated, are in the sciences. I think that's something that's also important to see. As I said, not knowing anyone that's a scientist or even a doctor or anything. Well, I don't know, that's other people. And so I think it is very impactful to see people actually doing this and be like, no, it's okay to, maybe you're thinking you're annoying, but you're like this for a reason. And you just have to keep going and don't let other people shut you down.
You mentioned designing a new chemistry lab course last time we talked, and the goal was to help students become more independent and better prepared for advanced work. Could you share some of the specific strategies or teaching methods that you found most effective in fostering that kind of student growth?
And specifically teaching labs and anyone that's taking a general chemistry lab, it's seen a lot of those labs are looked at, they're just making a recipe. So it's the cookbook type experiments. So one thing that I've noticed with students, when you just give them these types of experiments, they're great for training techniques. But once you're trying to actually become and feel you're a scientist, you have to start getting them to understand that they're looking for these different questions. They have to figure out these things on their own. It's not just about following a recipe, because as any researcher knows, sure, you can come up with a plan But most of the time, things don't go as you really did plan it. One thing that I'm doing with my lab courses is kind of changing how pre-lab assignments are done. So instead of having them define a specific concept and then do a few calculations, I'm using the pre-lab assignments for them to watch things, technique videos. These are the techniques you're going to use. You're going to be learning how to do them. And also they are designing their own procedure. This course, I designed every experiment for the students to complete 2 times. The first week is what I'm calling the guinea pig week. So here you are designing your procedure, and also the pre-lab assignment is also walking them through how they should be thinking about the procedures and the different steps. So it's a guided inquiry experimentation. Then we'll test their procedure. And at the very end of that lab session, I'm going to have students talk to each other and map out their different procedures. If something just doesn't go well you're not just going to be, okay, it didn't work. You're going to go back. You're going to try to figure out what happened. And so I'm trying to get students to collaborate with one another at the end to see, well, what worked, what didn't work, to try to redesign the experiment for the second week. Because the theme of my course is having a growth mindset. Just because you can't figure something out the first time you're doing it doesn't mean that you won't get better. It also doesn't work the second time. That's okay. You probably learned something new along the way. And I think I learn a lot more from my failures than when something works. You just have to keep going. And I think this class, I'm just trying to get them to be more independent as being scientists. This is for our chemistry majors. So we're trying to get them to take this class to also help them get into research labs. You're learning how to think of writing procedures and what should you be thinking of? What is thinking big picture? What questions are you trying to solve? How do you get to the answers? And if you didn't come up with the answers, what can you test to try to get these answers? At least I know if some students will probably decide not to be a chemistry major, because I know I've had students tell me that they didn't realize chemistry wasn't for them until they started research. And sometimes that's not until their 4th year. And then they're in that dilemma being a 4th year and almost being done with their undergraduate career, that then they're trying to switch to a different major. And at the same time, for the students that really do want to do chemistry, we're trying to give them just extra help to become more independent sooner so they can be successful in a research lab. And then hopefully possibly go to graduate school in chemistry.
Was it a difficult sell for your administrators to do it? Because now the students theoretically have half as many experiments, but their learning is more growth mindset oriented.
This was a new course, so I was given free range to do what I think would help. So I got lucky in that sense. What you brought up is a very valid argument. That's one thing that some of my colleagues were a little worried about. We have 10 weeks to do experiments. We typically do about 8 in regular classes, and I'm only doing half of that. It was trying to sell more that these are more impactful instead of them just following recipes. Because at the end of the day, do our students really learn from every single experiment? Because sometimes students just feel they're rushed. And sometimes I feel I'm just rushing students to be, okay, you have to learn this, 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 and this. And no, this course is to make them more independent. So how do we make them independent without them realizing that, hey, I have a second shot at this. My plan A didn't work, but let's try plan B. And then at the very end, when they're writing their lab report, part of it is them explaining if they had an opportunity to do a plan C, what would they do? How can they really grow from this experience?
It's a great argument to emphasize quality over quantity, especially in the lab environment, where it's every minute spent at the lab bench is meant to build their technical skills. But if we're rushing through it, are we really giving them that? Is there any data that you've been able to collect, or is there plans to collect data so that you can demonstrate the depth of their learning with fewer quantity?
This is going to be some of the research work that I am doing. I'm waiting back from my IRB. It's still getting reviewed. But regardless if it gets approved or not by this fall, which is in about 2 weeks, I will be starting a pilot program with this because I am hoping to track and also demonstrate to students how they can grow throughout 10 weeks. They will be doing very simple tasks the very first week, as in measuring out 5 milliliters of water or weighing out solids. So some of these things we take for granted as experienced researchers. If you really sit there and look at an inexperienced researcher do these very trivial tasks, a lot of the times they're really not weighing out 1 gram of salt, or they're not accurately weighing out 5 milliliters of water. And we know, as with experience, there are glassware that are specifically used and designed for these types of activities in a research lab. One thing I noticed with, say, general chemistry, a lot of students don't think of that. They'll just see something Erlenmeyer flask and they'll, sure, I'll just weigh out 5, or I'll use a beaker to do it. Analytically, though, if we are really caring about precision and accuracy, we have to take more thought about what we're doing. Students will start off doing these very trivial tasks. And then at the very last week, they will be doing the same thing. And I'll be showing to them, maybe you weren't that accurate week 1, but look at how much you've grown in the span of 10 weeks. And so I'm really hoping that this type of data really convinces not just my department, but IS in general, that it's not just about quantity, it's about quality. And we can really make impactful experiences with these students it doesn't matter that you can't measure out accurately 5 milliliters of water. That's fine. Maybe you're still not that great at it by the end of the 10 weeks. You are still in training. And I think that's something that I've noticed a lot of students get upset with, that they think that these types of techniques don't take time to develop. At the end of the course, I'm hoping that the students learn from this and start to reflect on the activities that they do to prepare them to become researchers.
I love the idea of giving them data to help them reflect, to say this is how accurate you were throughout the 10 weeks, and this is how productive you were, whatever measures that you could come up with, to where they can look at the data to support. Because it's one thing to reflect on our own learning. It's another thing to have data to show our progress. In your experience, what are some of the key challenges that your graduate students are facing in developing their teaching skills for these labs? And what advice would you give from that to PIs and departments looking to better support their graduate student instructors?
I would say post-COVID is imposter syndrome. A lot of the times our graduate students may be teaching an upper division, say lab course, their first quarter, and some of the times the students are the same age as them. Most of them just graduated from their own undergraduate experience. So I've noticed that I've had to chat a lot with some of the graduate students on how to deal with. Another thing that I notice with our graduate students that are incoming is, will they need training in teaching? And I think it's important for departments and PIs to really want to support their graduate students by emphasizing the importance of teaching. Teaching is actually very beneficial to you as a scientist. When I started graduate school, I was very intimidated. Okay, well, these are really smart kids, and they were going to be asking me a lot of questions. Do I even know all the answers? I was just in their position a couple of years ago. It's okay. One knows all the questions, but I think it's important to tell graduate students that they may experience these types of feelings. And there's things that we can do to practice. And it's also okay to just say, oh, look, I don't know. I will look it up and I'll get back to you. I do think that a lot of times students just think that they need to know everything. Sometimes we get students that have a master's degree. Sometimes with those students, they're too caught up with knowing all these details of these different chemistry concepts, and they have a difficult time understanding that, well, these are just freshmen taking general chemistry. Some of them may or may not have taken chemistry in high school. And even if you take chemistry in high school, there's a big debate. Do you really learn any chemistry in high school? They have to break down these concepts to students. And sometimes that is a big challenge with the graduate students.
What can we do as research scientists to make that pipeline stronger, to help connect what we do to what is being taught in high school chemistry?
I know someone told me that I was even making TikTok videos for high school students to watch their research. And I thought that was a really great idea. I see the importance of creating these 30-second videos and talking about what type of research they're doing or briefly explaining something in chemistry. I really do think that as PIs, just setting yourself as an example is very important.
What advice would you give to research scientists who want to get more involved in mentoring and professional development for the next generation?
A lot of the times, if they want to get involved, it's go give talks, go create videos. I think specifically with PIs in your research group, it's really useful to take time from group meetings every time you're meeting with your graduate students to talk about professional development. As faculty members, we get so many emails every quarter, every semester about what's going on campus. And I think not everyone thinks to forward this information or bring it up in a group meeting. And I specifically emphasize bringing it up in a group meeting because also you are just forwarding a message. Graduate students will also be receiving multiple emails that you'll lose track of what this is. But it's really this one-on-one or you with your students that will be like, oh, they really think that this is important and how to write a CV, for example. Maybe I'll make time to go. So bringing in the importance of taking time to do that, I think is really helpful. One thing that a colleague of mine told me that their advisor did was they would bring in a lot of their alumni to give talks on during their group meetings. And sometimes they would lead them into doing things, mock interviews, what to experience in different industries, which I think is really important. Doing something that is very impactful. I think demonstrating to your students how important it is to build up your network. So if you're at a conference, going up to bringing your students along with you and maybe introducing them to some of your colleagues, I think will also be pretty impactful for the graduate students.
Between your design of the research labs where the students have two opportunities and the way you're thinking about bringing in alumni, it seems you're really focused on dissolving these sort of curtains that are around what prevents us from understanding what scientists are. And that makes sense because you told me a few times that as a young person didn't really know what a scientist was. So I just wanted to point that out, that I find that really encouraging and inspiring, that you want to dissolve the barriers that were put in front of you so that other people don't have to experience that.
But I think it was really overcoming these obstacles. It shouldn't have to be that. I would think it make the process a lot easier. And a lot of the times I think it's also just really understanding, is this what I really want to do?
I still find myself asking that question. Even at our age and our stage in the career, it's just, who am I? And that question comes up all the time.
And I think it's okay to have that mentality. And I think it's something newer with our generation. And I think as our generation, we're making it more acceptable to transition from different industries.
Speaking of transitioning in industries, you experience chemistry through all of these different realms. You're an entrepreneur in chemistry, you're an educator, you're a researcher. Is there anything about that trifecta that basically gives you superpowers for doing what you do? Is there anything that it really informs your teaching or it really informs your research or your entrepreneurship, having experiences in the other realms?
What it really helps me is understanding how it's not obvious. You go to school, you get a PhD. Well, now what? There's academia. I know a bunch of professors, but what if I want to be a researcher in private industry? Or what if I want to work in the government? Or what if I start my own company? A lot of that really isn't discussed. You're really only exposing yourself to academics. Well, true academics are just focused on being an academic, because if they didn't, they wouldn't be successful. You won't get tenure if you're doing all these other things. And I think I do have a unique perspective on changing industries, working in the private industry, being an academic, and then also the whole business side that can be very informative with students. So one thing that I have a big passion in doing in my career, and we are both in SACNAS, you said, I would really love to help something, the SACNAS organization, build up more resources for people that want to become entrepreneurs or people that do want to transition to different careers and pathways. And we're still trying to figure out how to do within my university, but I think can be very impactful in such a large organization. Most of these students don't really understand what there is to do. And so I think we can try to take down some of those barriers and explain it and expose them to different things.
Our podcast has a tradition where the past guest gets to ask a question of the future guest. Our past guest, or your past guest, was Dr. Valeria de la Rosa Reyes. And her question for you was,
I wonder how she's able to integrate some of the research or experiences in her classroom. I wonder if she will be able to allow the students to do a project and kind of develop some way, and how she can handle or the great leadership roles that she is in.
I am trying to figure out how to do this in my classroom. So I am a trained inorganic and materials chemist. And because I am in charge of some of these labs we've been discussing, I am trying to figure out how to create research experiences for the students. So there's something in chemical education called CURE, as Vanessa is course-based undergraduate research experience. So I'm trying to figure out how to use some of the things that I did. I did a lot of membrane technology. I did a lot of thin films as a graduate student. And I'm trying to figure out how to collaborate with some of my colleagues and use mini experiments that are research-based from what is being done here at UCSB. I think this is going to take a while to figure out, but ultimately I would to do something that, because I do think it's difficult to try to integrate both of them, especially when I deal with very young students, first and second year students, and they don't have a good gauge of understanding. So we'll make these research projects simple enough, but impactful enough that can really train them as scientists. It's still a work in progress.
our next guest is going to be Dr. Checo Colongad. I have his profile pulled up here to introduce him to our audience. Stephanie, do you have a question for Checo?
I'm curious, how are you navigating recent changes with funding for your graduate students as an associate dean in your college?
Stephanie, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
I look forward to seeing you at SACNAS.
Shout out to anyone else who's going to SACNAS in October. Feel free to write in the comments, what is your home institution and what are you looking forward to about being there? We'll see you soon.